Everyone received gifts except me. Mom laughed. Oh, we forgot to give you yours. Did they expect me to cry? I smiled. It's okay. Look what I gave myself. The room fell silent when they saw it. My name is Leah Kim. I'm 31 years old, and 5 years ago I left Seattle without looking back. I worked as a back-end developer for a cybersecurity company that had contracts with major banks and government agencies. I wasn't just good at what I did, I was indispensable. I solved problems that other teams couldn't even describe. But outside of work, it was as if I didn't exist. At least, not to my family. We hadn't spoken since 2016, so when my phone vibrated on a quiet Wednesday in October 2023, I was surprised to see my cousin Rachel's name. She was the only one who had my new number. Leah, she said softly, your parents are trying to contact you. They want you to come home for Christmas. I sat slowly on the edge of the bed in my small Brooklyn apartment. Now? I asked. After all these years? They've been asking about you, Rachel said. It seems like they're serious this time. I hung up and stared at the wall. I hadn't thought about my family for months. Years, actually. But the memories came back quickly. I was always the odd one out, never the favorite. I remembered when I was 13 years old, sitting in a cold office chair with my knees to my chest while Dr. Patel, my childhood psychologist, told my parents clearly, Leah's problems don't come from isolation. They come from being ignored. My mother scoffed, we love all our children equally. But I knew it was a lie. My older brother Dylan was the charming captain of the football team, student council president, the golden boy. They gave him a car when he turned 16. They gave me a used sweater that still smelled like someone else. Even at Christmas, Dylan's gifts gleamed under the tree. Mine looked like they were bought at the last minute. But this year, they were finally calling me back, and I had no idea who I'd become. Family gatherings had always been a nightmare. Dylan stole the spotlight. Charismatic, loud, charming. I faded into the background like another piece of furniture. No one noticed. That's when I discovered programming. It all started with an old flyer pinned to the school bulletin board. Introduction to Computing Club, Room 207, Thursdays after school. I went once and never missed again. For the first time, I felt like something understood me. It wasn't people. It was the logic of code. The club became my refuge. We repaired old computers with parts from the trash. We exchanged books, debated compilers, and stayed up late helping each other with bugs. I even developed my first game on a borrowed laptop. Mr. Alvarez took me aside one day. You have a special talent, Leah, he told me. Don't let anyone make you feel less. At 17, I already had a plan. I applied to universities, left Seattle, and decided to build my future from scratch. Dylan, of course, was already at an elite university in California with all my parents' financial support. And then came that graduation dinner. My dad raised his glass. To Dylan, proud of you at Stanford. Everyone toasted. Then my mom added, and Leah? We're encouraging her to look for stable work. My uncle joked, we need dishwashers at the restaurant, and the whole table burst into laughter, including my parents. I didn't laugh. What they didn't know was that I had already been accepted with a full scholarship to a top-tier technology program in New York. Tuition, housing, and even a stipend all covered. I packed quietly and moved to a dorm in Manhattan. I worked as a waitress part-time, graduated with honors, and got my dream job at a cybersecurity firm before the ink was dry on my diploma. 4 years later, I led a multi-million-dollar integration for a global bank. The bonus was enough to buy property. So I called a real estate agent. In a few days, I found the perfect apartment in Fort Greene. 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, exposed brick, near the park. At 31, I officially owned my own home. 2 weeks before Christmas, I had a small gathering to celebrate. Just my true friends, the ones who saw me stay up late, cry over code errors, and still keep going. We sat on cushions on the floor eating Thai food with cheap wine, surrounded by unopened boxes and lots of laughter. Lisa raised her glass. To Leah, she said, the quiet one who turned silence into power. We toasted. I smiled, but there was a thought that wouldn't leave me. In a week, I would be going home. But this time, I wasn't returning as the invisible girl. This time, I was coming back as someone who knew her worth. The week before Christmas, I took a few days off work. I packed simple but thoughtful gifts and drove the 6 hours to my old neighborhood in North Seattle. The house hadn't aged well. Faded paint, untrimmed bushes, a porch light that flickered like a dying memory. I rang the doorbell with trembling hands. Footsteps were heard, and then the door opened with a creak. Leah. My mom blinked. Wow, it is you, She gave me a brief, tense hug. You look different. Inside, the smell hit me. Old wood, stale air, and that eternal bowl of dried potpourri. The living room was full. Conversation stopped when everyone turned to look at me. Look who decided to show up, someone said. Someone's wearing fancy pants, whispered another voice. I looked down. Perfect cut black pants and a designer coat. Quiet luxury. Clearly lost on this audience. Then Dylan came out of the kitchen, smiling. Everyone, this is Mia, my wife. And he pointed to her belly. Your future niece or nephew. Congratulations, I said. He smiled smugly. Still locked in a corner with your computer? The laughter was immediate. I felt my jaw tighten. I work in tech, I replied calmly. If you've ever returned home with more power than they could imagine, subscribe, because next time, the last part of this story changes everything. Tech? Dylan mocked. Like fixing printers or answering support calls? He turned to the others. Isai. Leah was always the weird one. She probably works from a dark basement. I barely smiled. Something like that. Mom clapped her hands. Dinner will be ready soon. Leah, leave your things. Dylan uses your room as an office now, so you'll sleep on the couch. Of course, obviously. The night was a slow rain of condescension. Aunt Nora cornered me by the watery punch. Your brother is going to launch his own business. He has an amazing vision. And you're still doing that computer thing. I develop software, I responded. She wrinkled her nose. Ah, well, someone has to do the boring stuff. Uncle Mike leaned in while they were preparing dinner. We still have that dishwasher position open at the restaurant. It's minimum wage, but it's honest work. Thank you, I replied politely. I'm fine. At dinner, they seated me at the end of the table near the kitchen door. As always, Dylan dominated the conversation. This is going to revolutionize the market, he declared. We just need the initial capital to get started. How much do you need? Dad asked. About $150,000 to start, Dylan replied, giving me a challenging look. It's a lot of money, but the risk is worth it. My father nodded, as if he were listening to the theory of relativity explained by Einstein himself. I bit my lower lip to keep from laughing. I'm sure we can work something out, my father said. We could mortgage the house. We've always believed in you, son. I felt a lump in my throat. I remembered when I asked for $500 for an advanced programming course. They told me money doesn't grow on trees. Aunt Carmen raised her glass to the future entrepreneur of the family. Everyone toasted enthusiastically. No one looked at me. After dinner, while everyone gathered in the living room to exchange gifts, I slipped away to the kitchen. I needed a break. I took out my phone and checked my emails. 3 security alerts that required my attention. Nothing I couldn't resolve remotely. My mother came in, balancing a stack of dirty dishes. Could you help a bit, don't you think? She said in that tone I knew so well. Of course, I replied, putting my phone away. You should be out there socializing, she continued as she opened the dishwasher. You've been missing for years and now you're hiding in the kitchen. I started rinsing the dishes in silence. I thought about telling her that I wasn't hiding, but taking a moment to breathe amid the avalanche of condescending comments. But I knew it was useless. So? She asked after a moment. How are you really doing? Rachel mentioned you live in New York. I'm doing well, I replied dryly. Still working with those computers? Yes, Mom, I still work with computers. She sighed as if I had confirmed a family tragedy. At least you have steady work, I suppose. At that moment, Dylan entered the kitchen with an empty wine bottle. He left it on the counter without even looking at me. Mom, we're opening the gifts. Everyone's waiting. She immediately dried her hands. Of course, honey. And then, as if remembering my existence, she added, Leah, finish with the dishes and come when you can. I watched as they left together, talking animatedly about the latest gift Dylan had bought for Mia. Something broke inside me. It wasn't the same old slights. It was the bitter confirmation that despite the years, nothing had really changed for them. I was still the same invisible girl. I finished with the dishes and slowly made my way to the living room. Everyone was sitting in a circle, surrounded by shredded wrapping paper and shiny ribbons. My father was wearing a new sweater, obviously a gift from Dylan. My mother was admiring a necklace hanging from her neck. The aunts and uncles were exchanging cards with pleased smiles. I stood in the doorway, observing the family scene that had always made me feel like an outsider. The small bag with the gifts I had brought remained untouched next to my suitcase. Dylan saw me and smiled smugly. Ah, Leah, we're almost finished. Did you bring something for the family after so long? All eyes fixed on me. I felt the blush rising up my neck. Yes, I answered, approaching to take my bag. I brought a few things. I began to distribute my gifts. A cashmere scarf for Mom, a book on the history of navigation for Dad, his only passion besides Dylan, a tea set for Aunt Carmen, and so on. Small but carefully chosen gifts for Dylan and Mia. I had brought a handcrafted musical mobile for the baby. Thank you, my mother said, examining the scarf with bewilderment, as if it were an alien object. It looks expensive, Aunt Nora commented, gently touching the material. It was nothing, I replied. Dylan unwrapped the mobile and looked at it confused. It was made by children in a workshop. It's handcrafted from an artist's collective in Brooklyn, I explained. Each piece is handmade. He let out a nasal laugh. Sure, very New York. We prefer practical things, right, Mia? His wife nodded automatically, though I could see her eyes lingering on the carved pieces of the mobile with genuine interest. Well, my father said, checking his watch, I think we're done with the gifts. Everyone received gifts except me. Mom laughed. Oh, we forgot to give you yours. Did they expect me to cry? I smiled. It's okay. Look what I gave myself, I said, taking out my phone. I opened an app and showed photos of my apartment in Fort Greene. The room fell silent when they saw it. That's yours? My mother asked, leaning in to see better. Yes, I bought it 3 months ago. I replied naturally, swiping to show more photos. 2 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, near the park. Dylan let out a forced laugh. You must be up to your neck in debt. Not really, I replied. I paid for most of it outright. The company gave me a pretty generous bonus last year for an integration project I led. Bonus? My father frowned as if the word was new to him. What kind of integration? Uncle Mike asked, surprising me with his genuine interest. Banking security, I explained. I developed an authentication protocol that's now used by several international banks. An uncomfortable silence settled in the room. I could see the confused expressions, the exchanged glances, the general bewilderment. But suddenly, someone else spoke. It was my Aunt Carmen, the youngest of my mother's sisters, always somewhat marginalized herself. You work for a bank? She asked. Not exactly, I replied. Our company develops security systems that banks implement. I'm the technical lead for the back-end team. Dylan snorted. And what does that really mean? It means, Uncle Roberto intervened, that your sister probably makes more money than you'll see in your lifetime. His comment surprised me. Roberto had always been the quiet one, the one who observed from the corners at family gatherings. I didn't know he understood technology. Roberto looked at me with a discreet smile. My nephew works in tech too, he explained. He always talks about the people revolutionizing digital security. He mentioned your name once, but I never connected the dots. My name? I asked, confused. Leah Kim, the architect behind the Kim Out protocol, right? The one that solved the vulnerabilities in 2-factor authentication systems. I felt my heart race. Yes, that's my work. The expression of disbelief on my father's face was priceless. Are you saying Leah is famous? In certain circles, Roberto replied. My nephew says the best security developers in the country know her work. Dylan stood up abruptly. I'm going for more wine, he muttered, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the conversation had taken. My mother seemed genuinely puzzled. But you never told us. You never asked, I replied simply. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer the uncomfortable silence from before, but one loaded with realization, uncomfortable truths finally faced. Cousin Rachel, who had remained quiet all night, finally spoke. I always knew you'd go far. Leah, since we were kids. I smiled at her gratefully. She had been the only one who really saw me in those years. My father cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Well, we always knew you were smart. We were just worried that, well, that you were alone with your computers. I have friends. Dad, I said calmly. Good friends. And a job I love. I'm not alone. And then, as if the universe wanted to emphasize my point, my phone rang. It was a video call from Lisa and the rest of my friends in New York. Leah! They shouted in unison when I answered. How's the family reunion going? Their smiling faces filled the screen, a mosaic of different colors and expressions, all united by genuine affection. Interesting, I replied, turning the camera to show them the room full of silent relatives. Hello, Leah's family, Lisa greeted cheerfully. We just wanted to wish you happy holidays and tell you that you have an amazing woman in your family. We miss her here in New York. Lisa had always been the extrovert of the group. She continued, Did you know our Leah has just been nominated for the Turing Award next year? It's like the Nobel Prize for computing. My father almost choked on his drink. Award? What? It's not a big deal, I said, feeling the blush rise to my cheeks. It's just a preliminary nomination. Just a nomination? Lisa rolled her eyes dramatically. Derek, you tell them. Derek, my colleague and friend since college, adjusted his glasses with that nervous gesture so characteristic of him. Leah's nomination is a great achievement. Her work in quantum cryptography has revolutionized the field. Few developers achieve this recognition before 40. I saw my mother slowly sink onto the sofa, as if her legs could no longer support her. I quickly said goodbye to my friends, promising to call them later and put my phone away. The silence in the room was deafening. Dylan returned with the wine, clearly having heard part of the conversation from the kitchen. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and something I had never seen on his face when he looked at me. Grudging respect. Pour me some of that wine, would you? I asked with a slight smile. For the first time in my life, he did what I asked, without sarcastic comments. The conversation for the rest of the night was different. The questions now were directed at me, not Dylan. How exactly did my work function? What did quantum cryptography mean? Was it true that banks depended on my systems? I answered patiently, simplifying complex concepts, watching as my family's eyes widened with each explanation. Even Dylan listened attentively, though he pretended to be more interested in his phone. When I finally decided to go to sleep, my mother stopped me in the hallway. Leah, wait, she said with a faltering voice. Dylan can sleep on the couch. You take your old room. I shook my head. I'm fine on the couch, Mom. But now we know you're important, she insisted, and the transparency of her change in attitude almost made me laugh. I was always important, Mom, I replied softly. You just didn't see it. I left her standing there in the hallway, digesting my words. That night, lying on the uncomfortable couch, I checked my work emails. On my phone was a notification from a Swiss bank interested in implementing our protocol. Another professional success that would go unnoticed by my family until it was too big to ignore. But I no longer cared. I hadn't come seeking their approval. I had come to close a chapter, to face the ghosts of the past. And in a way, I had succeeded. The next morning, breakfast was a surreal experience. My father served me coffee without my asking. My mother offered me the last muffin. Dylan asked me with genuine interest about trends in cybersecurity. You know, he said while buttering his toast, maybe you could advise me on security for my startup. I could, I replied, sipping my coffee. What exactly is your business about? Dylan explained his platform for connecting local delivery services with independent restaurants. It wasn't revolutionary, but it had potential. The security plan is pretty basic, he admitted. We don't have a budget for anything sophisticated. Security shouldn't be an add-on, I told him. It should be integrated from the beginning. I can put you in touch with some junior developers from my team. Maybe they can help you as a side project. The expression of relief on his face was evident. That would be amazing, he said. It was strange to see Dylan vulnerable, grateful, as if he suddenly saw me as an equal, or even someone to admire a bit. After breakfast, while helping my mother with the dishes, this time she washed and I dried. A subtle but significant change. She broke the silence. We never understood what you did, she admitted quietly. It seemed so abstract. I know, I replied. We were proud of Dylan because we could understand his achievements. Team captain, student president. Those were tangible things. I nodded, letting her continue. But last night, when your uncle explained your work and your friends called, I realized that we've been wrong all this time. I looked at her, surprised by her honesty. I don't expect you to forgive me, she continued, scrubbing a plate that was already clean with too much force. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. Late, but proud. The words I had always wanted to hear. But curiously, I didn't need them as much as before. Thank you, Mom, I replied simply. Later that day, as I was packing to return to New York, my father appeared at the door of the living room. Your mother told me you bought your apartment, he commented casually. I nodded, folding a sweater. And that award your friends mentioned, is it important? Quite, I replied. But as I said, it's just a preliminary nomination. He nodded, processing the information. Then he took something out of his pocket. It was a small package awkwardly wrapped in crumpled gift paper. We forgot to give you this. This? Last night, he said, holding it out to me. I took it cautiously and unwrapped it. It was an old framed photograph. Me at 16, sitting in front of a computer at the school science fair. I remembered that day. I had won second place with a pattern recognition program I had developed on my own. No one from my family had attended. I kept it. my father said in a tone I couldn't decipher. I always knew you were special, in my way. I didn't know what to say. Years of indifference weren't erased with a late gesture, but it was a start, I guess. Thank you, Dad, I finally said. When I finished packing, I found Dylan on the front porch, sneaking a cigarette, like when we were teenagers. I didn't know you still smoked, I commented, putting my suitcase on the ground. Only when I'm nervous, he admitted. Mia would kill me if she knew. We stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the neighborhood, asleep under the weak winter light. I always envied you, you know, he said suddenly. I looked at him, sure I had misheard. What? I envied you, he repeated, exhaling a cloud of smoke. You knew what you wanted from a young age. I just did what was expected of me. But you were the favorite, I pointed out. The center of attention. He shrugged. Attention isn't always freedom, Leah. You built your own path. I just followed the path they laid out for me. I had never considered things from that perspective. To me, Dylan had always been the privileged one, the adored one, while I struggled to be seen. I never thought he might feel trapped in his own role. It's not too late to find your own path, I told him. He smiled ironically. With a baby on the way and a mortgage? Maybe. But at least now I have a successful sister who can give me business advice. His tone was light, but I detected a genuine respect that had never been there before. My taxi arrived shortly after. The farewell was less awkward than I had expected. My mother hugged me longer than necessary, whispering a "come back soon" that sounded sincere. My father gave me a handshake that awkwardly turned into a brief hug. The aunts, uncles, and cousins said goodbye with a new interest in keeping in touch. Dylan walked me to the taxi. Good luck with the nomination, he said. Really? Thanks, I replied. I'll send you the contacts for your startup when I get back to New York. As the taxi drove away, I looked out the back window. My family grouped on the porch waving. It was an image I never thought I'd see. Them watching me leave, wishing I would return. The drive back to New York was quiet. I processed everything that had happened, the subtle and dramatic changes, the words spoken and implied. My phone vibrated with a message from Rachel. You were amazing. You left them speechless. Call me when you get home. Home. The word resonated in my mind. For so long, Seattle had been a place to escape from, not a home to return to. But now, maybe it could be both. When I finally arrived at my Brooklyn apartment, I felt exhausted, but at peace. I dropped my bags at the entrance and poured myself a glass of wine. My phone rang again. It was an email from the Turing Award Committee requesting additional information about my work. I would respond tomorrow. I approached the window and contemplated the city lights. I remembered that night, 5 years ago, when I looked at these same lights for the first time from my small shared student room. Back then, they were lights of hope, of infinite possibilities, of a future I could build with my own hands. Now they were the lights of my home, of my victory. My phone rang once more. It was Lisa. Did you survive the family reunion? She asked. Barely, I answered. More than that, I replied, sipping my wine. I think they finally saw me. It was about time, she said with a warm laugh. Are you coming to our post-Christmas dinner tomorrow? Derek is making his famous risotto. I wouldn't miss it for anything. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and reviewed some code I had left pending before the trip. Everything seemed in order. The security system I had designed worked perfectly, protecting the data of millions of people without them even knowing it. It was strange to think that my silent work had more impact on the world than any grandiose speech or flashy title. Maybe that was the lesson. True power isn't always loud. Sometimes, like the code I wrote, it operates in the shadows, structuring the world in ways that few can see, but all experience. My apartment was quiet, but I didn't feel alone. The memories of the last few days danced in my mind like snowflakes. My father's surprised face, my mother's awkward hug, the reluctant admiration in Dylan's eyes. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible girl begging to be seen. I felt like the woman I had always been, strong, capable, valuable. I opened the small package my father had given me. The science fair photograph transported me to that day. I remembered the excitement of seeing my program working perfectly, the pride when the head judge congratulated me on my innovation. I also remembered the empty chair where my family should have been, and how Mr. Alvarez had taken me for ice cream afterward to celebrate my second place. I placed the photograph on my bookshelf alongside my diplomas and professional recognitions. Not as a reminder of what I had missed, but as a testament to how far I had come since then. My cell phone vibrated with a text message. It was Dylan. I talked to Mia about what you said. You're right. It's not too late to find my own path. Thanks for the advice, little sis. I smiled reading those words. Little sis. I couldn't remember the last time he had called me that. Without a mocking tone, I replied, anytime. The contacts for your startup will arrive tomorrow. Then I added, and hey, congratulations again on the baby. You'll be a good father. Because despite everything, I believed it. Dylan wasn't perfect, but he wasn't the villain I had built in my mind all these years. He was just a man trapped in others' expectations, just as I had been trapped in invisibility. That night, I slept deeply, without the restless dreams that used to haunt me after thinking about my family. The next morning, I woke up with renewed energy and a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. As I was preparing my coffee, I received an email from an unexpected sender. My mother. The subject simply said, your room. I opened it with curiosity. There was a brief, Leah, we're thinking of renovating your old room. It will no longer be Dylan's office. We want you to have a place here when you come to visit. What color would you like for the walls? Mom. I stared at the screen, moved by this small but significant gesture. It wasn't an elaborate apology or a grand declaration. It was something more valuable, an acknowledgement of my place in the family, a space reserved for me. I replied, mint green. That would be nice. Thank you, Mom. Then I added a postscript. I'll be in Seattle for a conference in March. I could stay a few extra days. I sent the email and stood looking out the window. Outside, New York was beginning to wake up under a gray winter sky. My phone rang with a notification from work. They had approved my proposal for the new security protocol I had been working on for months. I smiled. Life continued with its daily challenges and triumphs. But something fundamental had changed. I no longer carried the weight of the ignored child. I had left it behind along with the resentment and pain accumulated over years. It wasn't about my family finally recognizing my value. It was about me recognizing it first and building a life that reflected that truth. The rest, as a programmer would say, was just redundant code. My phone rang again. It was a reminder for the team meeting at 9 in the morning. The technical lead had to be present and prepared. I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, and took my coat. It was time to return to the work I loved with the people who valued me in the city I had chosen as my home. In the elevator, a neighbor greeted me cheerfully. Merry Christmas, Leah. How was the visit to your family? I thought for a moment before answering. Revealing, I said finally. Very revealing. As I walked through the streets of Brooklyn toward the subway station, I felt a new lightness in my steps. The gray sky above my head was beginning to open, revealing patches of bright blue. A new day, a new beginning. In my pocket, my phone vibrated once more. It was Rachel. You know what? I think you should come for New Year's too. The look on everyone's faces when you told them about your work was priceless. Also, your Uncle Roberto wants to introduce you to his nephew, the one who works in tech. He says you're his hero. I smiled. Maybe I would. Or maybe I'd invite Rachel to New York to show her my world. The possibilities stretched out before me like lines of code waiting to be written. While waiting for the train, I reflected on the strange journey my life had been, from the invisible girl in Seattle to the respected woman in New York, from imposed silence to my own voice, from family rejection to professional recognition, and now perhaps toward a reconciliation I never thought possible. The train arrived with a metallic roar, pulling me from my thoughts. The doors opened and I entered, mixing with the human tide of morning workers. In my mind, the pieces of the new security protocol were already beginning to fit together like a complex but fascinating puzzle. I was good at what I did. I was valued for it. And now, for the first time, I felt that these truths resonated in both my professional life and my personal story. The train moved forward, roaring through the tunnels, taking me toward the day that was beginning, toward the future I had built with my own hands, line of code by line of code, a future that was no longer defined by what I lacked, but by everything I had achieved. And that, more than any belated family recognition, was my true victory. 3 months later, as I was packing for my trip to Seattle, I received a notification that would change my career forever. I had been selected as a finalist for the Turing Award. My team organized an impromptu celebration at the office. Cheap champagne in plastic cups, sincere hugs, and a card signed by everyone. We always knew you were exceptional, my boss told me, raising his glass. The world is simply taking time to realize it. That night, as I finished packing, I called my parents to confirm my arrival. I have news, I told them. After the initial greetings, I told them about the nomination, explaining in simple terms what it meant in my field. I don't know if I'll win. It's like winning an Oscar. But for computing, I tried to simplify. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard my father's voice, husky with emotion. "I always knew you were special, Leah," he said, "since you were little." It wasn't true, of course. He had never known it. Or if he had sensed it, he had never shown me. But now he wanted to believe it. And I wanted to let him. "Thank you, Dad," I replied simply. "Your room is ready," my mother interjected. "Mint green, as you asked. And I cleaned your old desk. I thought you might want to work a bit while you're here." The gesture moved me more than I expected. It wasn't just a painted room. It was an acknowledgement of who I was now. "That would be perfect," I said. "Dylan and Mia are coming for dinner on Sunday," my mother continued. "They want to show you the baby's ultrasounds, and your Uncle Roberto insists that you meet his nephew." I smiled. Life takes curious turns. 5 years ago, I had escaped from Seattle vowing not to look back. Now I was returning, not as the invisible girl desperate for approval, but as a confident woman, recognized in her field, mistress of her destiny. "See you tomorrow, then," I said goodbye. As I hung up, I looked around my Brooklyn apartment. The modern, clean spaces, the view of the city that never sleeps, the technical books stacked next to science fiction novels. All this was my home, my refuge, the place I had built for myself. But maybe, just maybe, I could also start to feel at home in other places. In a mint green room in North Seattle, in the awkward but honest conversations with my family, in the small reconciliations that day by day were healing old wounds. My phone rang one last time that night. It was a message from Dylan with a photo attached. It showed a small office decorated with plants and a modern desk. "My new workspace," the message said. "Following your advice about starting small but dreaming big. Do you think it will work?" I replied, "It's a good beginning, and that's all you need." Because if I had learned anything on my journey, it was that beginnings, however small, contain the potential for extraordinary transformations. Like a simple line of code that can change an entire system. Like an invisible girl who can become a woman impossible to ignore. I turned off the lights in my apartment and went to bed, ready to dream about the journey ahead. Not just the physical flight to Seattle, but the continuing inner journey toward reconciliation, acceptance, and perhaps something like forgiveness. Because in the end, that was the true victory. No longer needing the approval I had craved for so long, but being open to receiving it now that it finally arrived. My name is Leah Kim. I'm 31 years old. And after so much time running away, I'm finally learning to return. Not as the person I was, but as the woman I've become. A woman who no longer needs to hide behind screens and code. A woman who, step by step, is learning to be visible not only to others but to herself.